Hi, welcome. My name is Angelina and this is my performance analysis series where I take my K-pop PhD, which by the way took me over 10 years to get, and review performances. And today we're going to be reviewing some performances from the Fact Music Awards. So from Ateez to 17 to GOT7 to even Mamamoo. And this review will be interesting because the quality of videos are terrible, so we must rely on intuition, how it sounds rather than the mouth shapes and how it matches the audio, since it's already pretty much out of sync. But alas, before we get started, don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with friends you don't have. You can also consider subscribing to this channel because we're 337,000 subscribers away from 500K. I think we can do it. So we're actually going to start off this video with a little bit of an intro. So if you already saw my review on the Mama performances, you might want to skip through. I've separated this video into super fancy segments. You can choose whoever you want to start with, but I do think the introduction is very important. And actually there was so much live singing at this award show that I was a little bit skeptical. I'm like, have they figured us out? Are they really recording idols out of breath and like making them lip sync over them out of breath? Like, what is this sorcery? You know, I wouldn't put it past production companies, but I digress. I was genuinely hearing idols out of breath. I was hearing idols when they stopped singing because they were just really into the performance, and I was really taken aback. I thought it was beautiful. I personally love LMR performances. Those are live music recorded performances where there's a backup track, but you still hear live vocals peeking through. I just find that I can connect more with a group if I can hear their live vocals. And actually with that, I'm going to explain to you the different types of performances we tend to see in K-pop. So first up, we have LAR performances, which stands for Live All Recorded. These performances kind of consist of idols lip syncing over a pre-recorded track, but this pre-recorded track is different from the studio version in that it was recorded with quote-unquote live vocals. But it's usually recorded while the idols aren't dancing. But the kick is they also record the idol's breath sounds into it, so it sounds quite convincingly live. So when you see these idols lip syncing over their own vocals, it's clear, it's crisp, it sounds absolutely perfect, but you don't hear any movement whatsoever. So for example, an idol could be completely out of breath, could be jumping in the air, but their vocals will remain perfectly stable. And usually the vocals don't match the energy. There's just a lot of telltale signs when a performance is LAR. Then we have LMR performances, which stands for Live Music Recorded. So again, these performances have a backup track, but you can usually hear live vocals peeking through, and the backup track can vary a lot in how loud it is. So it could be super low where you hear the vocals showcased very beautifully, or it could be so high that you actually don't hear them at all. And then of course, kind of on the side, we have auto-tune and voice smoothing filters, which can be used in the performances as well. So for an example that I showed in Mama, I showed a fan cam of Dynamite by BTS where Jungkook goes kick the drum and he does this kick, and you hear that movement in his voice, and there's actually nothing wrong with hearing that movement. His body is just moving and you hear that within the vocals. But then when you watch the actual stage for this song, you hear that it's been completely smooth. Now, please keep in mind that these are just descriptions of the types of performances that we tend to see. And I'm not trying to stigmatize one performance over the other. I personally think that idols have very valid reasons for picking whatever performances they decide to do. Whether it is to achieve a more perfected sound, which some people actually do prefer, because sometimes LMR performances can sound a little bit messy because you kind of hear two voices sometimes. Or whether it's to avoid scandal or backlash, which is super valid in and of itself. Idols are under extreme amounts of pressure, and with the globalization of K-pop, more eyes are on K-pop, more scrutiny is on K-pop, and so this whole shift towards more perfected vocals that I've been noticing throughout the years definitely makes a lot of sense. But regardless, whatever the case may be, I'm not knocking any of these idols for singing live or not singing live, because at the end of the day, we actually don't know their reasons, and also we have no idea what type of editing these production companies do for the final product. Also, we don't know how many takes they did to get that final product. They could have filmed that performance 5 times. So these are just my thoughts based on my personal preference and what is available to us. And with my luck, even idols who are out of breath are just lip syncing to them being out of breath. You know, we can't trust anything. Okay, let us start with GOT7, which was a group that I rudely excluded from my last video. I'm so sorry. I kind of figured the video was already 30 minutes and that I would eventually get to GOT7 in another award show. Even at that, we can still compare their Mama performance to this TMA performance. So in Mama, a lot of people were praising GOT7 for singing live. However, in my opinion, it was definitely an LAR performance. And I'm actually glad we can use this performance to contrast their TMA performance, which in my opinion is LMR, so live vocals. So again, for Mama, like their energy just wasn't matching the vocals, and the vocals sounded like very crisp, very perfect, and you heard absolutely zero movement. So even when Jackson was running up the stairs, his voice remained perfectly stable. But alas, in this performance, you can really hear the difference, and I'm going to show you some examples. So here's a perfect example. The first clip is going to be LAR, so lip syncing, and then the second clip is LMR, so live vocals. So you might notice when there is live vocals in a backup track, it almost sounds like there's two voices. What I really loved in this performance was definitely Youngjae, because he had a handheld mic and he would just kind of stop the choreography altogether to sing his parts. And I think we really need to normalize this a lot more. This was a lot more common in previous generations of K-pop, where idols had no choice but to just step away from the choreography and sing their part. Because you have to keep in mind, it was a lot clearer back then. Every single mistake could be heard. Now, there are still some instances where it doesn't quite match up. For example, when Bam Bam is jumping in the air and his vocals are perfectly stable. And this actually really isn't uncommon in K-pop performances, especially within the context of music shows. Each individual idol can choose how loud their backup track is. So if the backup track is really loud, you can kind of almost get away with not singing your parts. But if it's really low, you're obviously going to hear the live vocals a lot clearer. And this kind of becomes an issue, in my opinion, when the levels of backup track vary so much between each member, where it becomes really noticeable and kind of creates an imbalance within the performance. So you have one member belting their hearts out and you hear their rawness, and then the next member, you don't hear them at all, which is actually also quite common. But let us move on. So now we're going to talk about 17, another group that was not in the last video. So as a carer by proxy, I've definitely seen a lot of 17 performances, but I don't know each member super well. As I've said time and time again, I absolutely love 17's choreographies. I think they do a really amazing job at using their numbers to their advantage to create very beautiful stories. So I definitely appreciated that within their performances for both Fallen Flower and Fearless. So for the first song they performed, you could definitely hear some live vocals peeking through. There's not a ton of movement that you would expect to hear when they're just standing there, but the same applies to Falling Flower and Fearless. I couldn't hear movement, but again, I did hear some live vocals peeking through. And since they didn't sing the same songs at Mama, let's take a look at an Mnet performance where they are lip syncing, and let's compare that to the live vocals peeking through at TMA's. So I do think these are LMR performances that you can hear live vocals peeking through the backup track, but quite consistently the backup track is quite loud. Okay, so now we're going to talk about i-dle. So for Mama, I believe they did an LAR performance because there was definitely some inconsistencies. Again, the voices sounded perfectly stable, you heard no movement, and then during Soyeon's rap part, her mouth was just really not going in the same movements of what I was hearing. That being said, I was thoroughly impressed with this TMA performance because I heard movement, I heard live vocals, even from members who I had never heard sing live before. I just mean members whose voices that, typically were hidden by the backup track. I heard when members stopped singing, for example, when Sujin's high parts came on. And again, on top of hearing members stop singing, I also heard members that I didn't typically hear before in the past. For example, Uki, as she's doing this choreography, you can hear that movement in her voice. So So yes, I believe this was an LMR performance, and I think that their vocals definitely peaked through enough for me to be able to kind of connect with their energy. Though I wouldn't be surprised if this was filmed in a few different takes, since on a few occasions the voices don't quite match the mouth movements, but it's actually really hard to tell since the audio and video are already out of sync because these videos were re-uploaded by third parties. And I have been critical of i-dle in the past for kind of what I describe as an unbalanced performance. As I've expressed before, idols sometimes pick very different levels of backup tracks. So you hear someone with really live vocals and it's super raw, and then the next member's part, you absolutely cannot hear them, and it kind of creates like a high and then a low. But I was very happy to see that this performance for i-dle was very balanced. Moving on to Mamamoo, another group that I rudely left out. I do think it was a live music recorded performance, but much like 17, it was a little bit difficult to kind of pinpoint their voices. Now, I definitely did hear some movement within this stage, but it's definitely not as much as you would hear in kind of a typical Mamamoo music stage performance. So here's an example in a music stage where you can hear Hwasa's breath kind of shake because she's doing a specific movement, and then that compared to TMA. As for the styling, I love Hwasa's outfit so much. I feel like it kind of goes hand in hand with Jessi's outfit, which we're gonna see later. As for the visual effects for this performance, like, for me it wasn't it. If they were going for kind of this old school video game vibe, then I kind of understand it, but I've just seen stages where the visual effects are top tier, where it looks like they're on top of some type of building. Like, it looks really majestic and very beautiful, whereas this fake sand just wasn't it for me. Now, let us talk about Stray Kids, who performed God's Menu and Backdoor. I was so excited to see God's Menu because at Mama, they performed Victory Song. No offense to Victory Song, it was just not a song I was familiar with. But at the beginning, they had this really cool choreography and they used props like these little tables, and I thought that was an amazing touch. And much like GOT7, they definitely gave me these second gen vibes. You know, you would have a member who would step away from the choreography, who would just stop completely doing their choreography so that they could do their own parts. I just love when idols get so into the performance where they just forget about the choreography and focus solely on the energy that they're giving their audience, and the audience is us at home. So especially at that, when you don't even have an actual real life audience to bounce your energy off of, I still think it was an amazing performance. I still think that energy was transmitted through the screen and I really loved it. You could pretty much hear almost everyone just like trying to get those vocals out, trying to get their rapping parts out, like that intensity that you would expect from someone who is singing or rapping and dancing simultaneously. Like, it just felt very authentic to me. For example, this fellow with the raspy voice. Like, I felt that intensity that I remember from back in the day where idols were literally full of sweat, out of breath, and trying to push out their high notes, and they're just that look on their face. Let me know if you know what I'm talking about. So I really appreciated the performance. For the most part, the backup track was really, really low. But yeah, otherwise, I love their choreographies. I love their performances. Now we get to talk about Ateez. Right off the bat, crime number one was not giving Jongho a handheld mic. Like, I don't know who signed off on that, but they kind of get brownie points for putting him in this hairstyle. Jongho's forehead was literally trending on Twitter. But I digress. Hongjoong's energy at the beginning was really amazing. I was like, oh shit. But at the beginning of the group performance, I was really feeling like vocals were not peeking through the backup track. But then the first chorus came and suddenly we started hearing everyone. Like, when I say everyone, I mean everyone. For example, we can literally hear the movement in Yuno's voice at this point. We can also hear Seonghwa stop and resume his line in this instance. And I want to take a minute to talk about San, because San is usually a member who I feel the backup track is quite loud for, but I did nevertheless want to compliment his vocals for these performances. Because yes, you can indeed hear when he stopped. You know, there's this really dramatic part where he jumps super high into the air and you hear him going strong from the beginning, and then you hear his breath as he stops his line, and it sounds super intense. It's like he's gasping for air because he's just putting so much energy into his part. But I just wanted to say, like, I appreciated that intensity. Even if he cuts his line short, even if you can hear him breathing, even with all of that, I think it's still very meaningful. Whatever vocals that you do hear is still really meaningful, even if they aren't quote unquote perfect. Because it reflects reality. I mean, he's literally pouring his heart into this, and I personally appreciate having been able to hear that. So for Inception, we could hear him a little bit. For Thanks, we actually heard him a lot more. And actually, on that note of Thanks, right off the bat, we were hearing live vocals. I feel like we heard Ateez so much more for their second performance. So for Thanks, Hongjung did his own part, but then Seonghwa took over Mingi's part. And I was taken aback, because if you guys remember in Mama, Seonghwa also took Mingi's part, but you couldn't hear him at all. But this time, you could actually hear his live vocals, and I was just like, damn, like he did a really good job at that. But the member who stood out to me the most was actually Yuno. Like, I don't know if you could tell, but his live vocals are peeking through so much. But it was interesting because I find Yuno's voice quite soft. And I've explained this time and time again. For rappers, I find they can overpower their backup track a lot easier because you can kind of yell over the backup track. But if you're singing a super soft part and you're dancing really hard, it's a lot less common to be able to overpower your backup track. But this year in particular, I've definitely been noticing him singing live a lot more and a lot more consistently, so I'm really happy about that. So I just wanted to highlight that for a second. Moving on to Itzy and their Not Shy and Wannabe performances. I swear, Not Shy is definitely not a sad song, but I was like finding myself tearing up. Just the rawness in the vocals. I don't know what it is, just like the way they push out their vocals. Because here's the thing, they set their own precedent, right? They didn't just come onto music shows and started singing live. Like, they uploaded to their own channel a video of them practicing their dance and singing live at the same time, like unfiltered, no mics, nothing, just a video camera. And I was definitely not disappointed. I was tearing up like 57 seconds and I don't even know why. And I just love Itzy performances so much. I almost have nothing to say. I did want to point out Yeji's outfit. I loved the pink velvet with those gold accents. But otherwise, Itzy are just out here doing really amazing performances. They're being very consistent with their live vocals. But yeah, I'm super excited to continue supporting them in the future. Okay, let's move on to BTS as they performed Dynamite and Life Goes On. So for Mama, I expressed that my opinion was that their performances were LAR, but I think the Fact Music Awards are definitely a great opportunity to show you the difference in what I mean with BTS's more refined auto-tune vocals and their more raw vocals. Again, I think BTS are really amazing performers. I've thought this for a really long time now. People get really annoyed at my second gen references, but fail to remember that BTS debuted in Gen 2.5. I'm just putting it out there. So we already have tangible proof that they're capable of singing live and dancing live. It's just a question of what Big Hit wants to do with the final product. As I've shown in an example before, Jungkook saying kick the drum, the fan cam showing the movement in his voice, and then the final product having that smoothed out. So for Dynamite, I definitely feel like we hear more rawness within the performance. He omits the kick the drum part, so I feel like we can't show that as an example. But I'm going to show another example where you hear how perfected it sounds in Mama versus how raw it sounds in TMA. So I expressed that in Life Goes On. For Mama, I heard the most rawness, but it still wasn't clear. I kind of still felt maybe it was LAR, but at the same time, they're kind of just standing there. So it could have been just very smoothed out, a lot of auto-tune. But here we see they're all sitting down. So I'm going to show you again how their vocals can seem more refined or raw. So So overall, I was really happy to hear this rawness, even though the quality again was quite bad, but that's out of our control. Okay, now let's take a look at Super Junior. Yes, I'm putting aside my 10-year beef with Shindong to do this. I'm kidding. So when they performed their ballad, I really did like their live vocals. It sounded quite real to me, kind of in comparison to the vocal performances that we saw at Mama. For example, NCT U From Home, a lot of people asked me if I thought it was LAR. I definitely do think it was LAR, and you can just kind of tell from the shapes of their mouths and everything I've already mentioned thus far. As for their song Burn the Floor, definitely loved the lights that they used. You know, they were kind of sliding them across the floor to create a really interesting performance, and I really appreciated that. That being said, I've expressed in the past before that I think SM has become really obsessed with LAR performances, even for idols that we know are capable of singing. And when it comes to SM, when I express this, people get really mad. When I said Taemin did LAR during Mama, people were really mad. They're like, don't you know Shiny? To which I would say, I was there in 2008. You probably weren't born. Like, it's not my fault that SM is making their artists lip sync. Like, I fully believe that these idols are capable of singing live. I mean, take a look at this 2009 Sorry Sorry performance by Super Junior. Keep in mind, in 2009, Super Junior were super stable. There was not a lot of movement to be heard, but there's definitely that rawness. Of course, second gen choreographies were a lot different back then. But anyways, I'm going to compare this to a 2020 clip of the same song, same group, and you will see how vocals have changed to sound a lot more refined. These days, SM does not let their artists take a break for their vocals. You know, for example, in this Aespa performance, Ningning is doing a high note, and then she has to plop down to the ground and do that fancy little move. But if you look at the Sorry Sorry performance, you're going to see the people who are singing, the vocalists, handheld mics, they literally stop and they stay as still as possible while they are singing their hearts out. And even at that, SM vocals still aim to be literally perfect, at least in the past years. So no, I don't think SM artists aren't capable of singing live. I think, of course, they are. Like, SM is known for their vocals, right? And we actually have plenty of tangible proof that shows us that they're capable of singing live, that they are amazing vocalists. But I think this is definitely something that SM has been doing for a long time now, but it's a lot more noticeable, to the point where now it's just actual perfection, which doesn't make the most sense, in my opinion. Let us move on to Jessi. Now, she live vocals. Like, what can I say? So she performed her song called Star and Nununana. So for Star, like, her energy was just incredible. As always, I feel like Jessi has amazing stage presence. And for Nununana, I honestly can't say that I've ever heard her lip sync that song. I feel like she's just a really great example of live singing because she changes it every time. So for an LAR performance, you're going to see the same things every single time, the same breath sounds at the same time, the same intonation, the same exact voice sounds, because it's the same track. But for Jessi, like, she changes it up. She'll change some of her intonation. She'll change, you know, what ad-libs she wants to do, what parts she wants to sing. She changes it up. So it feels exciting every time. For example, the first "Oh Yeah" near the end of the song, she doesn't sing it and you hear it in the backup track. But then for the second "Oh Yeah," she sings it and you hear that clear difference. Overall, I think Jessi is a pure joy to watch perform, and I appreciate her live vocals. Also, her outfit was absolutely stunning. I loved it so much. Okay, let's talk about Enhypen. People who watched the show that created Enhypen tell me that they themselves pronounce it Enhypen, and that, like, the kind of H is not silent, but just isn't written, but is supposed to be there. So for Mama, I do believe they did an LAR performance. So for the TMAs, I do believe it was a live music recorded performance. You could definitely hear kind of two sets of voices, some vocals peeking through. Now let's talk again about TXT. So this was the first time that I actually enjoyed the visual effects. Like they were in a forest, there's that kind of fireflies. It was really cool. So for Can't You See Me, I feel like you could kind of hear two sets of voices, but at the same time, the backup track was really loud. But here's an instance where you can hear the struggle in Hyun Kai's voice, and I think it's so beautiful. But then we move on to Blue Hour and you hear that clear difference in vocals. Suddenly it sounds a lot more perfected and you can hear that clear difference. I'll show you the difference. So I think they did a very loud backup track for the first song and they did LAR for Blue Hour. And we can hear the exact same breath sounds as in their Mama performance for Blue Hour. Now let's actually take a minute to talk about this because when I mentioned breath sounds occurring at the same time across every performance, some people try to tell me that artists are taught to breathe at the same exact time because it's the optimal time to breathe. And I totally get that, but you have to look into other things as well. You know, I thought of that too, like it would make sense to breathe at the same time. But, you know, if the energy isn't matching the voice, if the voice itself sounds exactly the same, there's absolutely no change within the voice, and that breath sounds exactly the same to a T, then it's a little fishy like. You can kind of just tell, to be honest. Now let's end off with Twice. So they performed More and More and I Can't Stop Me. Now, I love Twice, I love their choreographies, I love like these different worlds that they bring us to, and I actually forgot how much I loved More and More. The like visual effects, they weren't the worst, but they definitely weren't the best, and there were actually 2 members down. So again, I do think this is an LAR performance for the same reasons that I mentioned earlier, you know, the same breath sounds you can hear, the fact that the energy from the vocals doesn't really match the energy from the performance, that it sounds absolutely perfect despite the fact that they're moving. Also, here's another really interesting telltale sign. Twice, for both members who weren't there, sounded exactly like they were there. Like you could hear their LAR live vocals even though they weren't there. But again, Twice are definitely a group that when they do sing live, they get so much hate. Like so much hate. And I feel like this has been the case for Twice for a really long time now. So I understand why they use LAR. I still love their performances regardless. As for the rest of the performances, I don't think they were uploaded by the time I filmed this video, but we're going to go through them very quickly. As for the rest of the performances, i-dle also did LAR, while the rest of the performances did indeed seem like LMR. But again, the audio was just so bad. However, I do have to say Monsta X really did stand out to me with their energy. And they also stood out to me a lot in Mama. But yeah, it seems that people really preferred this award show compared to Mama because idols were given hotel rooms to wait in rather than dusty ass parking lots. So yeah, please let me know if you'd be interested in me reviewing the rest of the award shows. There's KBS, NBC, SBS, Golden Disc Awards in January. If you guys are interested in this as a series, I'd be more than happy to do it. I think it's really fun, and I think for the most part, people just enjoy kind of hearing performances being talked about, and a lot of us understand that, you know, needing a backup track is not bad. Having very intricate choreographies and perfectly stable vocals is not reasonable and should not be expected from anyone. So yes, please don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with friends you don't have. And if you made it this far, my watch time thanks you. Don't forget you can also join my channel memberships by clicking the link in the pinned comment or even the join button next to the subscribe button. You can get a cute Kevin emoji next to your name for level 1. You can see videos earlier for level 2 and a Kevin emoji next to your name. And for level 3, you get all of that with the sneak peeks from level 2 and even member exclusive videos. These are the lovely individuals who help support my channel on a monthly basis. Thank you so much for your support. As for me, I'm gonna get going, so I'll see you guys next time. Bye!